And now, here's your host of Shaping Success, Wes Tankersley.
What is up, everyone? Welcome to Shaping Success. I'm your host, Wes Tankersley. We are back with another great interview. If you listened previously, we had a little solo kind of recap on some thoughts that I had, and now we're going to go back into another interview. The really cool thing about this, if you do want to join the Patreon, you can go ahead and do that. And I ask my guests before we do the interview if we can do a little after chat, and you'll get a little bit different side of them and myself, because there's a lot of things that we don't often say when we are on, like in the actual podcast, because, you don't want to really, you just want to see a different side of that. You want to know how people interact and things like that. And it can be a little more formal. So join the Patreon, go to westankersley.com, join that. If you need any merch, if you want, a Move Forward shirt or Shaping Success podcast gear, you can go check that out. Every donation or everything that you purchase from me goes to making the show better. In about a month here, I'm going to be moving into the studio that I built in my home. And there's a lot of stuff that I need. And anything that you can do to support the show is greatly appreciated. And it just helps make your experience better when you're watching, listening, and those types of things. Today's guest is Jerika Maher. She goes by Jerika from America. You can go follow her on Instagram. And also, she is a relationship coach. So we're going to welcome her to the show. Jerika, thanks for hanging out with me.
Absolute freaking pleasure, Wes. Thank you so much for having me on your show.
I think it's awesome. I mean, we started communicating, I don't know, a couple days ago. You set up the interview maybe a month ago. We started communicating a little bit back and forth, and it's awesome how on time and prompt you are, because a lot of people don't really do that. And I would mention to you in the beginning, it was funny because you sign up for an interview and then it sends you an email, and I need to reword my email, but you actually read it. Most people don't. So thank you.
Let's go. Hey, Wes, if you're early, you're on time. If you're on time, you're late. I learned that lesson when I was in 6th grade band class, and my teacher instilled that deep into my psyche. So I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here on time, and I'm happy to be here with your guest today.
Well, that's awesome that you learned that in band class, because I think that there's so many different places where people get that promptness, that on time, like being cognizant of what other people are doing is awesome. And a lot of times you get people who they're just there for themselves. And I appreciate that. So
absolutely.
Let's talk a little bit about what you do. We've had a couple Enlifted coaches on, and what I like about them, Mark introduced me to you, is that everyone comes from a different standpoint. Megan Henry was an athlete, is an athlete. I shouldn't say was, because if I said is, she might get a little bit upset. Maybe not, but she's a big time athlete. I had Brandon Miller on. He's a baseball coach, and they're coaching people, right? And so are you, but you're coaching people with relationships and showing them how to use their words in that way.
That's right. My philosophy is that our relationships, for most of us, are struggling, or we have a lot of room to grow. And the philosophy really is that our relationships with other people, first and foremost, begins with our relationship with ourselves. And if we don't start there, then we're setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah, and that is a big truth. I think that the biggest thing that I've noticed with people that I interact with, which are, you start giving off this vibe, and you get the people around you that you kind of get attracted to those type of people. And you start to glean information from them. And it's funny that I've noticed that, I'm an empathetic person, and it took me a while to decide that I have to take care of me first. Like, I have to put my life preserver on first before I can help other people. That's
right. Yeah. If we start backwards and we start by focusing on other people, that oftentimes comes from what we call codependency, and sourcing our sense of self and our money and our worthiness from other people. If we don't start first and foremost with ourselves, like I said, we're just setting ourselves up for success, and we're not being of greatest service to other people either.
And you're a certified coach. What kind of background do you have besides that? Because I've noticed that a lot of times there's other backgrounds as well that you were involved in that really got you into wanting to coach.
Well, my background is good old life lessons.
Life lessons.
And learning the hard way. And the truth is that some of the most powerful messages and lessons that we embody and instill and what templates our life purpose is the challenges and the messes from our own lives and learning to overcome those. And I'm certainly no exception. I grew up in a poor city called Vallejo, which is it's about 30 minutes east of San Francisco. When people think of California, they think of beaches and they think of LA and hot weather, and that can be further from the truth from where I grew up. Vallejo at one time was one of the first cities in California to declare bankruptcy as a city.
I didn't know that.
So, oh yeah.
Because I think of Vallejo, when I think of Vallejo, and I might be wrong because I was born in California, but I think of Marine World. Is that where Marine World is or used to be? Is it still there?
I am so glad that you just called it Marine World. That's like an old school. Yes, Marine World is in Vallejo, now called Discovery Kingdom.
Oh, interesting.
That is one of our claims to fame, and it's also the city known for a few prominent rappers, including E40 and Mac Dre. Mac Dre was one of the old school hyphy movement. So that's where I came from.
And E40 is at the Giants game all the time, so that's kind of cool too.
Oh yeah,
I'm a big Giants fan, so
let's go. I love it. I love it.
So Vallejo is kind of it's not that they declared bankruptcy. I mean, that kind of puts them with, I think Stockton was the last one that did that in California.
Yeah, it declared bankruptcy as a city when I was younger. And to be honest, it's still struggling. It's a beautiful city. You go in there and it's physically has so much potential. But it's a city that's embedded in poverty. And a lot of people who grew up there don't have parents that are supporting them. It's kids raising themselves or raised in these environments that really don't support mental health, emotional health, financial health, and really don't set people up for I'm generalizing here. There's of course exceptions, but relationship health. And like I said, it starts with us. And so if you're growing up in a city and in family environments where you're not supported in that way, where you're not lovingly attuned with your parents and you're just off, a lot of people in Vallejo, their idols are rappers, and their idols are not people that. Not to say rappers are bad. I love rap music, right. And when you're modeling after things that are not supporting your emotional health, you're not setting yourself up for success.
Yeah, and it's a big thing because I think that, like you said, if it starts with you, and you're in a crappy situation and you're trying to figure out how to get out of that, because a lot of people don't. They have that. Mark talked a lot about like the victim mentality. Like they have that victim mentality that my circumstances will define who I am. So I'm poor. I only have one parent. I don't have parents. I'm home. I mean, there's all these things that you could just hold on to, or you could think it through and kind of climb out of the shit, right?
Yes, and I want to add something to that. A lot of times people adopt victim mentality because they start with a survival mentality. And when you're in survival mindset and survival way of being, it impacts every area of your life. And so it's a mindset that is representative of the environment that you grew up in. And it's something that when you can move through those lessons and change your mindset and change your physical health and change your emotional health, you can set yourself up to be a powerful leader and role model and support other people who are going on their same journey. And that's been my life experience. I've been knocked down a lot, and I'm not alone in that. And it took a long time for me to not feel like the victim of my own life. And it's taking a lot of changes and full ownership that we're all given a card, a hand of cards. And you look at your cards and it's like, oh, I only have 2 of spades. What am I going to do with this for the rest of my life? That person has a whole queens and kings and a royal flush like that. And so from that perspective, it looks like, well, they have everything and it's just handed to them. Right. But the truth is that we do live in a country where we have so many opportunities. And if we can get ourselves in the right environments, if we can take full ownership of our own life, we get to have those royal hand of cards too. And that's certainly been my life experience. Things are going really, really well in my life. And it's taken, we have to choose to take full ownership of everything going on in our life.
And I think that a lot of people think that has to do, like, success has to do with what you have. Like, they don't understand that you can get what you want with not having things. Like, you don't have to, my parents didn't have a lot. I mean, I'm not saying that we were poor, but we didn't have a lot growing up. They had enough. And I knew that. And they taught us that we wanted to have more. Well, their idea of having more was go get a good job, go to college, get benefits, have all those things, have a retirement. And that doesn't necessarily have to be how it is. People don't understand that. Like, you can get certified to coach without having a degree in psychology. You have been through those things that other people have not been through. You could be a sales manager without an MBA. You could run a business without going to school to do those things. And they always just kind of put all these little pieces of paper or anything up on this pedestal that you have to be there. But they see the end result. I'm sure there's lots of people who look at you and go, well, she had this and she had that. And, you know, like this is how she got where they got. Well, they don't see the struggle that was there beforehand to get where you're at.
That's right. Yeah. And I have struggled a lot. And to be totally honest, I've created a lot of my own struggle too. And so, like I said, we start with a certain hand of cards. We are templated with a certain mindset. And then the truth is that often, most of the time, we end up creating our own struggle and believing that it's everything out there that is causing me to feel unworthy, unhappy with myself, stressed out, chronically dysregulated, and feeling really depleted. And so you're right. It's not just about what we start with, but it's about choosing a different life. And a lot of the choices for me to start a different life have come from me hitting my rock bottom, not once, not twice, not 3 times. But when you get there, you can make the powerful choice to say, things got to change. I've got to change. And by powerfully committing to change, you're committing to an absolutely different life. And so I have a lot of evidence of choosing that over and over and over again, and knowing that no matter where things are not perfect in my life, don't get me wrong. There's still so much that I get to grow through. Thank God, right? Like, we don't want to have everything perfect. It's a constant journey. I know, and I have so much evidence now. I have so much evidence. It's like, it's me. It starts with me.
Right. Yeah. And it's amazing because you can have, it's just like you said, like, you can have that, you have a choice, right? And it just really, it just depends on what you're going to do with that choice. It's never easy. There are always struggles. The difference between someone who is successful and someone who is not, and whatever their endeavor is, whether they're willing to move forward and continue to just keep pushing. And it's funny because I did an interview on a podcast. Sometimes I get to be interviewed, and I did a podcast interview. It's been almost a year now. And some of the things I said to myself, I was just like, you had 2 choices. Like, you compare yourself, because I think one of the other things that we do a lot of is we compare ourselves to what other people do, and we chase perfection. But every single thing that's happened in this world has never been perfect the first time, and people have to work through it to get. And I don't even want to say you get to perfection, because you never get to perfection. But you can always do better. You can always hone it, but you have to be willing to push forward.
That's right. That's it. That's it. In every area of your life, including your love life and including your relationships with your friends and with your family.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about, kind of the struggles that you had growing up in Vallejo and kind of where you are now. You don't have to, you can give us kind of an abbreviated version, because then I want to talk a little bit about, like, I'm assuming, because this is typically the way that I see things, like, I was a teacher and I wanted to be a teacher to help other people not go through the same things that I went through. So I'm guessing there's probably a story there too.
There's always a story. And as we've learned in Enlifted, stories are what shape our life, and the stories that we tell and the stories that we've been through.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up, here's part of my story. I was not a planned child, and my mom had me very young. And when I was young, my father left us, and my mom raised me on her own for a period of time. And she wasn't ready for that. And that I love my mom, and I love the fact that she did everything she could to support me the best that she knew how, and she wasn't ready, and that's okay.
How old was she when she got pregnant with you?
She was in her early 20s. She was in her early 20s. Yeah. So
that's pretty dang early. I mean, I know that there's a lot of people who, like, I waited until I was 32 to have my first kid. But there are a lot of people who I can't even imagine, like my little brother's got his girlfriend pregnant when she was 17. I can't even imagine raising a kid at 17. I can't, I can't even imagine where I would have been in the 20, like it just wasn't ready.
That's right. Yeah. I had my first stepdad, and he left also. And then my mom remarried, and I grew up with a stepfather that, to be quite frank, he didn't love me. He didn't like me. And I had all this experience of my biological father, my first stepdad, and my new stepdad, my dad, not loving me, not caring for me, not supporting me in the emotional ways that I needed as a child. And so a lot of our relationship problems start in our childhood, and we template our sense of self and who we think we are as children. And trauma is something that impacts people in a way that it imprints their sense of self and their relational patterns very, very early on. And so I grew up and I also want to say that my stepdad did the best he could too. And without him, I wouldn't be where I'm at either, because he did provide for the family in the best way that he knew how. And he didn't provide the emotional support that a kid really needs to thrive. Feeling like I was unworthy, that I was a burden, that I was not meant for love, and that there was something wrong with me. And that's a deep, 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 deep wound that still plays out sometimes. And I know now that it's a story, and it's a story that I continue to work through. And it's not something that drives my whole sense of self anymore. I know that I am sourced from something so much greater. I know that I'm here for a purpose. I know that I'm here to change my life first. And then as the hero's journey is so eloquently the story of, we have our own problems and our own mess, as I said before, and then we get to turn around and help other people. And that's where I'm at too. I come from a deep imprinting of people pleasing, and people pleasing is often something that people discuss as, oh, you're just so nice and you just want to help people, and you're just so, people don't realize that it's a relational style. It's a way that it often comes from a deep sense of unworthiness and a lack of skill set, and knowing how to assert ourselves, ask directly for what we need, lack of boundaries. And if you don't have those things in place, then your relationships are complete chaos. I'm talking not just romantic relationships, but also your friendships, your work relationships, all of it. And so people pleasers, and many people in general, have a really high tolerance for bullshit behavior, and they have low standards of how they're treated. And so it starts with choosing the decision, I'm worth more, and then acting from that place.
Yeah, and it's the funny thing about that, like as you're talking about it, I'm thinking about people pleasers, and I'm thinking about I've been in those situations multiple times. I'm currently in some of those situations, and there's things where you can't, like, for instance, my brother, same way. Like, he doesn't want to tell you what you don't want to hear because he's afraid it's going to hurt your feelings, and you can't do that. But I've also worked for managers or bosses who will listen to you, act like they really are into what you're saying, but they don't want to tell you that that's not the way it is. And I've always had a struggle with that because I've always been a matter of fact, I'm going to say it how it is. And people don't like it. Like I've hurt people that I work with feelings by just saying, why did you do it that way? Or why did, like just asking the question, like how not, and it's not like me going, how dare you? It's like, listen, this is not what we expect. This is why I want to know why you would do it this way. And I think that's hard. I think it's hard to hurt someone's feelings and not be able to explain why, and just like, okay, well, they said this and I'm going to do this because that's what they want. And I'm just going to go with the flow. Right.
Yeah. And you become like a feather drifting in the sky. You become a leaf drifting in the sky. You become at the whim of what everyone else wants. And I will say on the other end, like we all get to develop a skill set of how to communicate to people where they're at and do it in a way where they're still feeling valued and seen and respected. And all of us need to learn how to grow up, receive feedback, give feedback in a way that's productive and also kind and compassionate and loving.
Yeah. And I'm not going to, it's funny because I was talking at the beginning of the episode about the episode that I did last week, and I'm not going to ask you how old you are, but I'm going to tell you that I am 42 and I've been described as Gen X or Gen X adjacent. I feel like I'm Gen X. Some people may say, because like you look at the chart, like I was born in 80, 81, 82 is kind of where millennials pop in. And it's funny because I see like two sides of everything because I was right in the middle of that. We got stuck in technology, like we were the beginners in technology. And now we're in between where we have a relationship with technology that is unhealthy because everyone has an unhealthy relationship with technology, I feel. But it's also taught us that we can't communicate anymore. Like we're afraid to have a conversation with someone. I walked into the auto parts store and there's 3 people standing in the back looking at their phone. I walk in and typically you're like, hey, how's it going? You get greeted and then you come around the corner and at the counter, or is there something I can help you with? Nope. There's a self-checkout. The guy looks at me, looks at the self-checkout, and I look at the self-checkout and I'm like, really? You're not even going to say hi? I'm just going to go do this? And I could have just walked out with the damn gas can,
Yeah.
But that's I think one of the things that we've gotten lost in this world is that we're afraid of confrontation. And if we can't be told that something that we did was not right and accept that and move on. We can accept the praise because that's easy because that means that someone's telling us we did a good job. But
yeah, the praise becomes a drug. And the truth is that for many people, we don't have a baseline sense of happiness. And so we are constantly seeking external validation and we're constantly seeking external stimulation to be able to run away from the fact that we don't feel really good about ourselves. Right. And for all the gifts that technology has endowed us with, it's also made it very challenging to learn how to communicate with each other. We're in the wild west where we can run away from our problems very quickly, and then we can also enter a tiny screen that is that takes us. Sorry, that was my phone.
Oh, you're fine.
It can take us away from our problems, and it can also feed us an algorithm where we're just receiving everything that we believe in and finding people that agree with us, and everyone who doesn't agree with us, we can behind a screen talk shit and one of the number one relationship skills is learning how to have conflict well. Because when you're in a relationship with 2 people, you're 2 different people with 2 different experiences, 2 different ways of thinking, 2 different ways of communicating. If you don't learn how to have conflict well, it's going to be a disaster. It is a disaster.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and that is, like you said, like the communication part is completely gone. I look at like, partially it's my fault. Like I look at my 9-year-old that I have. I think one of the big things with that is like, I'm sitting here thinking about my relationship with my 9-year-old and how I didn't have, like, my parents were like, go outside, go play, go do this, go do that. Because we had a TV and we did have a computer, but it wasn't like, it was for doing homework. Like we could write papers on it. We could do that stuff. And now we take and we're like, here, take this iPad and go watch something or go do this or go do that. And we're not interacting with them. And then we have this pandemic that takes kids out of school. Now they're not getting their social interaction at school, and then they don't know how to socialize with people. It's crazy.
It's crazy. And it really, parents get to choose to take full responsibility of this wild, wild west that we're in, and recognize that children need their full attention and their presence, and that giving them an iPad every time that they feel unhappy, what they're not teaching their children the skills of learning how to emotionally regulate their nervous system. Right. And so we're setting ourselves up for a lot of addiction and a lot of conflict with interpersonal relationships.
And it's funny that you call that an addiction, because I don't necessarily know that people think of it that way. I mean, I do, because you can't put it down. You can't live without it. You need it. Like it's something that my job entails. I'm on my iPad all day making quotes or talking to people, sending out emails. It's a way that we communicate. But the reality is if we have to put it down for like an hour, we want it, right? Like we got to have it. Like we got to look at who said what on my Instagram post. What do I got going on in my email? What do I got? Like there's always something that you can be doing on it, and it takes your attention.
It takes your attention. And we've all had that experience of not knowing where our phone is for 5 minutes, and it ensuing this sense of dread. Like, where is it? And if that's not evidence of addiction, I don't know what it is.
Yeah. Well, I think that people don't, like I've heard people describe a drug addiction different than an alcohol addiction, different than like a food addiction. Like it's all addiction. It's all something that you have a problem coping and dealing with because you take something away, right? That you have to have.
Yeah. And if you're a people pleaser, and not just people pleasing, but also people pleasing, you are addicted to the reactions that other people give to you. You are addicted to the validation that other people give to you.
Yeah. Tagging on the relationship part, because this is what you do, right? Like you're a relationship coach. So we can talk a little bit about how you got there, but I think one of the things that really intrigues me is the fact that you hear people in relationships always talking about how come I can't find the right person for me? And then you see them time and time again. And I made the same mistakes. I basically dated like 3 people before I got married because I found the one. Doesn't happen with everyone, but the 3 people, like I was constantly trying to decide what I didn't like about this person that would make this person better, But I feel like there's a lot of people who can't move up or move out or move away from that, and they attract the same type of person over and over again. And with that victim mentality, it's always their fault. It's always the other person's fault. It's never them when they're making the choice to select this person.
That's right. Yeah. And it's very, very common for us to blame and point fingers for everything going wrong in our relationships. And the truth is that it takes 2 to tango. There's a lot of evidence that second marriages they typically don't last, unfortunately. And that's because people believe that, well, the problem in this relationship is that I was just with the wrong person. Right. And the truth is that if we don't shift the patterns in our own life, we're going to keep attracting those same patterns and recreating them in our next relationship, in our next relationship, in our next relationship. And is it true that a lot of people end up in abusive relationships? Yeah. And can it be described that it's that there's one person that's abusing the other person? Yes and no. If we end up with a lot of toxic relationships and abusive patterns, and again, I'm speaking for myself here. It's because we keep choosing those people, and we keep choosing to replay the same patterns that attract toxic people. And going back to the being afraid of conflict, if you don't know how to self-advocate for yourself, if you don't know how to assert boundaries, you're going to attract people who don't like people, or who want to be with people who don't advocate for themselves, who allow really abysmal behavior. If you have a high tolerance for that, and if you don't stand up for yourself and stand up for your own standards, you're going to keep choosing that. It's unconscious, right? Like it's unconscious until it becomes conscious. And when you can take it back, like, oh, it's me. I'm the one who's choosing that. I have a low sense of worth. I have a high threshold for, or not threshold, but I have a high embodiment of stress, you're going to keep attracting that same chaos in your next relationship.
Yeah, and I hate this word, but this is instantly where my brain went, because I do not like the word narcissist, because I think that everyone is described as a narcissist now. Like they're a narcissist. That's why, it's like, that's it. They're a narcissist. They just, I mean, the reality of the situation is if they are a narcissist and you've had multiple relationships with people who you consider narcissists, maybe you're looking at the wrong person. And those people will start, like, if you attract those narcissistic people, it's because you're doing more for them than they're doing for you. And that's what they like. And they see you as an easy target. They can take advantage of that. So you have to shift that blame back to yourself and realize that this might be a me problem.
It is. I want to add one thing, which is statistically, narcissism is on the rise. And it used to be a phenomenon that was delegated mostly to men, but it's about 50-50 now, where people who are clinically diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder, it's 50-50 women and men. So yes, the answer is yeah, I absolutely agree with you. It's a term that's used way too flippantly, and the focus is completely on the other person. I'd love to talk about this topic for a little bit because it's a fascinating topic.
Oh, I agree.
And the truth is that narcissism is something that's on the rise in both parties. And so narcissism and codependency, or people pleasing, as I keep talking about it, the truth is that they're two sides of the same coin.
Agreed.
And so both codependency and narcissism are on the rise. And you can't have this huge influx in narcissism without the perfect environment for it. And so, and a lot of that comes back to technology, and that a lot of it comes back to just how we're showing up in our own lives.
Yeah. And I think that the biggest thing is like, I'm trying to, like, my thought has always been like, okay, so now, like, there's a lot more diagnoses, right? Like, and then people actually bring this word to the forefront, and then it becomes something that, like, it's always been there. So I know that there's really drastic cases of narcissism, right? Like, but is everyone in their own way just a little bit narcissistic? And there is a lot of people too that are trying to help that person because they just want, like you said, they want to be a people pleaser. So I can see exactly how that goes hand in hand. It makes a ton of sense. It's how long are you going to, as the person who is the people pleaser, entertain this person who, basically a vampire. They're sucking that life out of you to make you feel that way.
Yeah, and like I said, it's two sides of the same coin. Right. And I'm so glad that you're able to see this, because, and I fell victim to this in my own life, where I kept attracting narcissistic people over and over and over again, and feeling like, what the fuck? Like, how is this possible? And it really comes back to me. Like, I had a very, very low sense of self-worth. I had, again, very high tolerance for poor behavior, and people pleasers and codependent type people, they're fully sourcing their sense of self from another person. Right. And so you have someone who's saying, hey, this is how it is. This is what we're going to do. This is, and a people pleaser is going to be like, yeah, okay, sure. I'll do whatever you want, because they're not able to source that from themselves. Two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
And they could be like, let's just say there's a level, right? Like, they could be a level 7 narcissist and get a level 7 people pleaser. And all of a sudden that people pleaser has turned them into a level 10 narcissist. And, I just see it. Like, that makes so much sense how easily this could be so destructive to both parties.
Absolutely. And do you want to hear the one word that will, let me help all the guests who are watching right now who keep attracting narcissists. Do you want to hear the number one word that is a narcissist deterrent? It'll save you a lot of time. It'll save you a lot of energy. It'll save you a lot of money.
This is gold right here. Listen up.
All right. It's no. No. It's so easy. It's no. If you find yourself with a narcissistic person and you confidently, lovingly, compassionately self-advocate and say no over and over and over again, bye, that person's not going to want to be around you. They're not going to be able to source energy from you. Right. But the truth is that a lot of people don't know how to say no. It's something that saying no, for me, used to completely dysregulate my nervous system. Like I'd go into a whole fight or like, I can't say no. And so what people pleasers do is they avoid saying no. They avoid any sense of conflict. And it becomes a perfect environment for someone who is a so-called narcissistic person. You're a perfect match. And that's a tough pill to swallow because you can get into these relationships that are really toxic and you're getting treated really, really badly. And it's easy to say like, they're doing this, but I'm being so nice and I'm being so giving. Learn how to self-advocate, learn how to say no. And those people are not going to be attracted to you. They're going to go instantly look for somebody else. That's how it works.
And the bad thing is you have to realize, like, you have to, being, kind of an empath or being a people pleaser or being that type of person, you have to realize that you don't have to do that for them. It gives you that mentality that, like, if I don't do this, like, I'm being the bad person. I'm the one who's the problem because I'm not doing, enough for this other person who is just draining you.
Yeah, and a lot of empaths and codependent. I want us to really quickly touch on the idea of what an empath is. Mm-hmm. There are absolutely people who are hypersensitive to energy, and I'm definitely one of them. But going back to the childhood environment, where I don't believe that necessarily the story that empaths are just born that way. I do believe that some people have a propensity to a higher level of energy sensitivity. And going back to the childhood environment, if you grew up in a childhood where you are so hyper attuned to every thing that could cause chaos and disruption and conflict in your environment, especially with your parents, where something like opening a door can be a clue as to what am I supposed to do right now? Like, should I go hide? Should I go get dinner for him? Like, you're actually training yourself to be hypersensitive to all the cues in your environment. And so it is something that's real. And we got to also look at the fact that a lot of so-called empaths have so many of the same characteristic traits as codependents. There's a huge overlap in those variables. And there's a reason for that. And so those of you who are watching and who consider themselves empaths, I acknowledge your path and your sensitivities and all of that. And you've got to learn your own energy management and recognize that there is a hard pill to swallow. There's a very covert sense of control that people pleasers and empaths, I'm going to overlap them right now just for this discussion.
Yeah.
There's a control aspect of controlling your environment and controlling the perceptions of other people so that your nervous system can be less chaotic and less conflict, decrease your stress. You can control the perceptions of other people so that you're getting your needs met. Right. It's a way to get your needs met still. And so if you're not if you're not getting your needs met by yourself, you're going to hyper focus on your environment and the perceptions of other people so that you have a so-called solid sense of self.
It's I don't know. I just keep thinking back to you talking about, having a stepdad and having, multiple people in your life. And a lot of times my thought, like, my parents were always together, but I think about like how that could be something that would totally just disrupt your situation, because all of a sudden your father leaves and you have this, why? What did I do wrong? And then the next person comes in and you're like, all right, I don't want them to leave, so I'm going to do this differently so that I can make it so that they stay. And if I'm not making them happy, I've got to figure out a way to make them happy so that, like, just like you said, so you can get the needs that you need met, because you need someone to, cultivate that relationship, teach you how to be an adult, train you, get you to school, like do all these things that you learned on your own because you had to fight through it. You had to focus on it. You had to do it, but it's a harder path. It's not a straight line. It's never a straight line, but the line is much more crooked for someone who has to struggle through those situations.
Absolutely. And I'll also add one more thing. An empath can go into a room and there can be 99 people who are having a jolly good time and they're having fun and they're happy. And a so-called empath can instantly attune to the one person that is unhappy and angry, and then their focus unconsciously becomes attuned to that person. And so if you're really an empath and you're absorbing all the energy, why is it that we're absorbing the energy of negative people?
Right.
It's because we're unconsciously we're looking for threats, and then we're matching with the people who we're attracted to that. It's and I say that with so much love and so much compassion. And we talk about the victim mentality. It starts so early on, and so I just want to acknowledge those people and recognize how hard it is.
Yeah.
And so for me, one of the most important things is learning how to regulate my own nervous system. I choose not to be at a baseline of stress anymore. And people who are empathic and codependent, again, we're going to overlap them a little bit. I know there is a difference and there's a lot of overlap.
I agree.
They typically have a very high baseline of stress. They're not loosey-goosey free people. I'm generalizing right now. They're people who have a very high baseline of stress. And so again, they're looking for people to give them a sense of self, and they're unconsciously attracting conflict. And when you can learn this skill of taking ownership, it's like, oh, I'm feeling stress right now. The stress is showing up in my chest. It's showing up in my body. What can I do to ease that? And it's not just a one thing. We talk a lot about the importance of breath, and learning how to breathe well is certainly one of the most powerful, impactful things that you can do. A lot of people are breathing very high in their chest, and they're like, and the truth is that a lot of empaths and a lot of codependents, they don't know what the baseline of no stress feels like. And so that is their baseline, and to learn how to get it back to an open level is so freaking important.
Yeah. Well, and breath is one of those things, like talking to, Mark a lot more about it, and just like talking to people in general about breathing. Like I never really, meditation is a form of, like you can breathe, you're supposed to breathe through meditation, right? Like that's one of those things where you can get back to this baseline. And I always just sit there and I think, someone's sitting there with their legs crossed and they're holding their fingers together and they're saying Om and they're breathing. Like that's not really what it is. It's your brain it needs oxygen, right? And so the breathing is super important, because when you deprive yourself of that, you're not thinking clearly. And so you can't have these thoughts without doing it. It's amazing.
Yeah. And I will also say that it's so much more than just breathing well. That's one tool in your toolkit.
Right.
Learning how to eat well, drink clean water, get good exercise, do the things to what I've from an outside perspective have always looked healthy, but I have not been a healthy person until about a year and a half ago. Learning how to eat neutrally dense foods, take your supplements that are really high quality, drink really clean water. That is something that when you can really get on top of that, your life is going to be so different on the other side, and your baseline stress levels automatically go down. Eating healthy and drinking clean water, breathing well, get all those dialed in fully.
Yeah, well, and I mean, I think the big thing again is to look when you're in a situation of stress, when you're in like a bad relationship, and you feel that way, recognize that you're not taking care of yourself, because I think that that's the majority of the problem, right? And part of that is just what you said. Are you doing those things for yourself? Are you putting on that life preserver first, taking care of yourself before you take care of others? And it's not selfish. It's something that you have to do, or you cannot be the best version of yourself.
Yeah, you can't be the best version of yourself, and you can't show up for other people fully either.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a great conversation. I think, tell people a little bit about, with your coaching, what you do, because like we talked about, Mark is the head coach, but there's all these people that have all these different fingers. It's like, I figure it like this big octopus with a lot of legs, and there's all these different types of coaching. Yours is more based on relationships. And how do you help people, and how can they contact you, and just kind of give that spiel a little bit?
Sure. Well, one thing that's misunderstood, and a lot of it is societal programming, is that love is not enough. Like it's easy to fall in love. We can fall in, and a lot of falling in love is this chemical concoction that happens early on in a relationship that's full of hormones and neurotransmitters. The falling in love bit, that's easy. Having a healthy relationship takes a lot of work. It takes a skill set. And communication skill is head of that list. Like I mentioned before, learning how to have conflict well, learning how to ask for your needs, learning how to address things when they're small, having clarity on vision of how you want to share your life with another person. These are all valuable skill sets that anybody can learn, and it takes practice. It's a practice thing. We're not going to get it right away, and it takes a focused skill set and practice. If people want to reach out to me, my Instagram is jerika.alexis. That's jer.alexis, Alexis on Instagram. And I'd love to reach out to me if you want any support.
Yeah, and I appreciate you coming on and talking about this, because I think that there's a lot of really good topics that we covered, and people struggle with these things. And it's amazing some of the tools that, Enlifted brings, in coaching and things like that. I watched Mark last night with one of my friends on his live, and it just it's pretty amazing what putting it on paper, wherever you're coming from, and working through it and changing the way that you talk to yourself can change a lot of things. And in relationships, maybe I always look at, I've been married 23 years, and I look at my marriage as being a compromise. And some people say, well, that's not what it is. And it is a compromise. You have to be willing to have that difficult argument, come to a conclusion, and move forward. Otherwise, when you fail to compromise, when you fail to have that interaction, that's when the marriage fails, because someone has decided that they don't want to continue to compromise or continue to converse or continue to work it through.
Yeah, and seeking as much as possible a win-win scenario. Yep. Because a lot of what people experience is developing a lot of resentment in their system. They feel like they're victimized. They feel like they're losing out a lot. And to have a successful relationship requires two people coming together, having many conversations, and it can be fun. It doesn't have to be this tense, just we're in this business meeting and icky. And the relationship should feel open and flowing and fun most of the time. And to have those conversations that are constantly seeking a win-win, so that one person isn't feeling a high level of resentment towards the other person. And going back to what you were saying about stories, the stories in our head, not just about ourselves, but the stories that we're telling about the other people is so freaking important. And most of the stories that we're telling ourselves and about our partners and about relationships, we're positioning ourselves as victims most of the time.
Yep.
And they're always doing this. They're never doing that. I'm not getting this. Da, da, da. If you can learn the skill set of taking those stories out, putting them on paper, it's magic, because you're purging those stories out of your mind, but then you can look at the stories and you can see, does he never listen to me? Is that true? Why is that the story in my head right now? He never listens to me. Is that true? How can I shift that one word, he never listens to me, and make it more accurate? He sometimes doesn't listen to me. He sometimes does listen to me. What can I, and from there you're much more powerful in how you move forward.
Yep. It's an art. So
it's an art.
Yep.
It's an art.
Well, I appreciate you hanging out with us. We'll make sure that everyone can find you in the show notes. And
awesome.
Thanks again.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, everyone. Awesome conversation with Jerika. If you do want to hear a little bit more of what we talk about, go join the Patreon for as little as $4 a month. You can help us to make the show a little bit better. And until next time, I challenge you to find the shape of your success.